Welcome to another anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing outreach session, presented by the Anti-Money Laundering Anti-Terrorist Financing Department of the Bermuda Monetary Authority, also known as the Authority or BMA. I would like to note that throughout this presentation we will refer to anti-money laundering as AML and anti-terrorist financing as ATF. This session continues the outreach seminars the Authority has conducted already with many regulated financial institutions in Bermuda as part of our ongoing engagement strategy. This strategy aims to keep all industry sectors updated on AML changes, any focus areas for the Financial Action Task Force and other areas in which industry sectors are either performing well or in need of improvement. We hope the information we present will increase the dialogue within the industry on critical issues, assist the financial services sector in strengthening AML/ATF systems and controls, and enhance overall compliance with the legislation. Our presentation today contains relevant information for the securities sector, including an overview of some significant money laundering and terrorist financing risks and vulnerabilities. We will also examine various industry trends and case studies we have come across during our supervisory work. Additionally, preventive measures designed to strengthen your company's AML/ATF program will also be discussed, and we will explore how the Authority's published guidance notes can help companies such as yours achieve greater compliance with AML and ATF requirements. To cover this content, we have divided the presentation into two sections. In the first section, we will discuss money laundering and terrorist financing risks, AML obligations, supervisory trends, and the Authority's expectations of the securities sector. The second section of the presentation covers information on money laundering and terrorist financing trends, typologies, and suspicious activity reporting procedures secured from the Financial Intelligence Agency, also known as FIA. Finally, we will also review the results of our supervisory work within the securities sector and discuss the preventive measures known as the AML/ATF regulations, which are designed to make your company's AML/ATF program more robust and comprehensive. We hope today's session creates opportunities for more outreach by the BMA and more positive engagement with the BMA for your company. The BMA monitors how the securities sector applies the AML and ATF financing regulations. Internationally, the securities sector in Bermuda is regarded as a vibrant and resilient marketplace that attracts both local and globally focused companies. The BMA oversees the sector to ensure it complies with current regulations. As part of our supervisory obligations, we work to ensure that all regulated financial entities are complying with their regulatory obligations through outreach and on-site supervision. Entities are expected to do their part for the sector by conducting Know Your Client and customer due diligence checks on every customer, as well as transactions that are conducted to ensure companies such as yours are complying with Bermuda's laws. Compliance standards should top the list of your company's senior management priorities to enable your company's AML regime to remain robust and compliance-focused. The BMA recognizes and actively fosters innovation within the industry. However, strict compliance with AML and ATF regulations is also vital to its success. It is the ability to strike just the right balance between innovation and compliance that has made Bermuda a highly respected, secure, and attractive international business destination. We will now focus on several critical pieces of AML/ATF and sanctions legislation that impact the securities sector. All regulated financial institutions should be aware that the International Sanctions Act 2003 is a standalone piece of legislation that is separate from the AML and ATF legislation. In this session, we are going to concentrate on diving into both the 2008 Proceeds of Crime AML/ATF regulations and the Supervision and Enforcement Act. It is worth noting that the Proceeds of Crime AML/ATF regulations apply to all regulated financial institutions, including those in the securities sector. The significance of these regulations cannot be understated as they form the primary legislative framework upon which we base our assessment of your company's compliance during an AML/ATF on-site review. all licensed regulated financial institutions are expected to maintain a robust set of policies and procedures that comprehensively cover all aspects of the regulations. Today's agenda will focus on several critical aspects of these regulations. In addition, regulated financial institutions are required to refer to the General Guidance Notes for MLTF Regulated Entities 2023 as well as the sector-specific guidance notes for the securities sector. And finally, let's not forget that the formation and evolution of Bermuda legislation and regulation adhere to the international framework, which is periodically revised by the Financial Action Task Force and assessed by the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force. Bermuda's existing national risk assessment was developed using the World Bank's risk methodology model. This tool, which is tailored to the traditional financial sector, provides detailed and nuanced insights into sector-specific risks. Let's focus on the heat map from Bermuda's 2020 National Risk Assessment. As highlighted, the overall risk rating for money laundering is categorized as high. This is driven by medium-high vulnerabilities and the significant threats associated with money laundering practices. Turning to the investment businesses subsector, which includes investment managers and broker-dealers, the inherent vulnerability rating is assessed as medium-high. This rating is influenced by factors such as the large volume of cross-border transactions, technical complexity, and the clientele profile, which includes high net worth individuals and politically exposed persons. Similarly, the subsector of investment funds carries an inherent risk of medium-high. This is due to its global reach, substantial international transactions, technical complexity, and diverse clientele. For fund administrators and investment funds specifically, the customer profile vulnerability is assessed as medium. For non-licensed persons, now referred to as Class A and Class B entities, the inherent vulnerability is also rated as medium-high. This rating is primarily driven by the client profile, which includes high net worth individuals, sophisticated investors, and the significant asset sizes associated with these entities. Finally, it is worth noting that Bermuda will conduct another national risk assessment this year. This updated assessment will accurately reflect any changes in risk levels since the 2020 review. The following slide outlines some crucial risks and vulnerabilities that the securities sector must consider. Let's begin with layering ownership, which is also known as non-transparent corporate structures. The peculiarity of such intricate ownership structures lies in their secretive nature. The complexities surrounding actual ownership often decrease customer due diligence to around 25%. All companies need to conduct thorough due diligence processes. This includes identifying, verifying, and adequately documenting every natural person associated with these entities. This should take place when the person first associates with the company and throughout their life cycle. Market manipulation, another risk, can significantly create illegal profits that could be laundered through the securities marketplace. This manipulation might even involve insider information, adding an extra concealment layer. Neglecting proper customer due diligence poses a serious risk to your organization. We know your customer practices can create critical vulnerabilities, allowing illicit activities to go undetected. This is especially dangerous when dealing with high net worth individuals or politically exposed persons, as insufficient due diligence increases the likelihood of illicit funds entering the securities market, potentially causing regulatory breaches and reputational damage. Your company must exercise caution when outsourcing AML and ATF functionalities, as limited control over outsourced entities might result in several key shortcomings. These include inadequate AML measures, inconsistent regulatory adherence across jurisdictions, and overlooked suspicious activities due to insufficient training and complex networks that can make tracing and mitigating risks challenging. Another risk is a possible delayed response to emerging risks or regulatory changes as a result of over-reliance on outsourcing. Relying on outsourcing can also expose you to additional vulnerabilities. If third-party providers are lax with AML compliance, it could lead to regulatory issues. Any legal obstacles or restrictions on sharing critical information or over-reliance on their systems could disrupt operations and lead to further legal or reputational damage. Furthermore, intermediaries such as broker-dealers and investment advisors serve as vital links. However, they can inadvertently, or sometimes knowingly, aid in money laundering activities. These situations may occur if an intermediary neglects due diligence or handles complex transactions that obscure the source of funds. Now let's examine what regulated financial institutions must do to create an effective MLTF risk assessment. We will look at the different threats and vulnerabilities faced by the securities sector, and the steps that regulated financial institutions can take to identify and manage these risks correctly. Step 1 is to ascertain the inherent risks. Regulated financial institutions must identify the potential risks concerning their customer base, business relationships, geographic operations, products, services, distribution channels, and transactions. It is important to remember that these risks need to be assessed as initial challenges that exist prior to applying any mitigation measures. Regulated financial institutions must allocate risk ratings based on the vulnerability of these areas for potential money laundering or terrorist financing activities. Step 2 is to establish a risk tolerance level. A regulated financial institution's risk tolerance is the level of risk it is willing to endure to achieve its business objectives. Regulated financial institutions might choose to maintain a high risk tolerance, but must then ensure that their risk mitigation strategies mitigate the risks faced. Step 3 is to develop risk mitigation measures. Regulated financial institutions must formulate and document appropriate and effective policies, procedures, and controls to manage and mitigate the identified risks. Step 4 is to evaluate the residual risks. After the application of mitigation measures, residual risks will remain. These risks should be assessed based on customers, business relationships, geographic areas, products, and services. In cases where residual risk exceeds a regulated financial institution's risk tolerance, it must revise its mitigation strategies or consider ceasing or declining the business. Step 5 is to implement risk mitigation measures. Day-to-day activities must reflect the risk mitigation policies established by a regulated financial institution. Senior management must ensure clarity of expectations. Employee training should mirror the identified risks. Board oversight is also instrumental in this step. Step 6 is to monitor and review the risks. Lastly, a regulated financial institution must regularly reassess its risk-based approach as money laundering and terrorist financing threats can continue to evolve based on changes in customer behavior, technology, and market conditions, as well as the rise of emerging new threats. We strongly recommend developing a risk matrix for business money laundering and terrorist financing risk assessments. This creates a clear visual representation of the risks and enables more informed decision-making by emphasizing the most critical risks. It also aids in directing resources toward high-risk areas, resulting in a more efficient risk management approach. Next, we will focus on customer risk assessment, which is the foundation of a strong AML compliance program. The first step is the customer risk evaluation. This involves analyzing customer profiles to assess their potential risk of involvement in money laundering or terrorist financing. Key factors include their professional activities, geographic connections, transparency, and any history of criminal involvement. Next is the geographical risk assessment, which examines the jurisdictions tied to a customer's business activities. Certain regions may pose higher risks due to weak legal systems, widespread corruption, or their reputation as tax havens. The third component focuses on products, services, and transactions risk. High-value or complex transactions can present significant risks, with certain products, such as virtual currencies, requiring particular attention. The fourth step is assessing channel delivery risk, which evaluates the methods used to deliver products or services. Channels such as online or non-face-to-face methods often carry higher risk levels compared to traditional, in-person transactions. The final steps involve customer screening and ongoing monitoring. Comprehensive customer screening must occur during onboarding, while ongoing monitoring ensures any unusual trends or changes in activity are detected over time. Throughout this process, the compliance officer plays a key role, especially when managing high-risk customers. Detailed and accurate records must be maintained for each customer's file to support risk-based decision-making. An essential part of the assessment is determining each customer's risk rating. This will be classified as low, medium, or high. This must comply with Regulations 10 and 11 of the Proceeds of Crime Regulations. Adhering to these guidelines ensures that financial institutions strengthen their AML compliance programs with an effective, risk-based approach. This slide highlights red flags that may indicate potential risks of suspicious activities related to money laundering or terrorist financing. First, identifying natural persons or beneficial owners can be challenging, especially when dealing with complex business arrangements or ownership structures. This lack of transparency raises concerns about the true identity of those involved. Second, funds originating from foreign banks in high-risk jurisdictions often raise red flags. These transactions complicate business relationships and require heightened scrutiny due to the potential risks associated with such regions. Third, a notable concern arises when customers request payments to be routed through correspondent accounts held by the regulated financial institution instead of their own accounts. This unusual practice warrants further investigation. Fourth, the involvement of intermediaries or third-party service providers who do not apply MLTF measures equivalent to or higher than Bermuda's standards present significant risks. Their lack of robust compliance measures can expose the institution to vulnerabilities. Finally, reliance on, outsourcing to, or accepting as customers any intermediaries or individuals who have not undergone sufficient review can pose serious challenges. This is particularly concerning when these parties are involved in any MLTF functions within the securities sector. Ensuring thorough due diligence and compliance checks is essential to mitigate these risks. Now, let's examine the preventive measures a regulated financial institution must undertake to thwart money laundering and terrorist financing. This includes applying a particular focus on customer due diligence, including exhaustive identification verification procedures, such as gathering the necessary documents and verifying information as required in Sections 4.27, 4.28, 4.29, 4.38, and 4.57 of the General Guidance Notes for AMLATF Regulated Financial Institutions on AMLATF 2023. Beyond verification, all AMLATF processes, including transaction monitoring and record keeping for reporting, should be meticulously documented to ensure precision, transparency, and effectiveness. Businesses also need to adopt state-of-the-art technology and analytics tools. These tools make real-time monitoring of transactions and the swift reporting of suspicious activities possible. It is prudent for the company to retain accurate records of all transactions and due diligence paperwork for at least 5 years. Continuing on this topic, the securities sector should use a risk-based approach for AML and ATF with preventive measures adjusted based on the various risk assessments that they conduct regularly. In addition, other vital components of a robust AML-ATF program include implementing stringent internal controls, conducting customer screening against sanction lists, utilizing blockchain analytics tools, regularly submitting suspicious activity reports, and maintaining an up-to-date comprehensive sanctions program. Maintaining the minimum requirements across all branches and subsidiaries is essential, as is the requirement to halt transactions if suspicious activity is observed. Regulated financial institutions must ensure that their independent audit obligations are adhered to, as well as their obligation to have a compliance officer employed at the managerial level who is adequately trained to carry out the role and is responsible for the AML-ATF program. If your company relies on third parties, you must ensure that they comply with Bermuda's AML obligations. When outsourcing, proper procedures must also be in place to guarantee the effectiveness of third-party screening practices that focus on employee proficiency and integrity. Despite outsourcing, regulated institutions bear the ultimate responsibility for any shortfalls. The role of the money laundering reporting officer is vital, and they need to be fully trained and supported with solid procedures. Providing role-specific MLTF training for compliance and reporting officers, management, staff, and board members is also essential. With these steps in place, the securities sector will be well prepared to tackle MLTF challenges robustly, proactively, and effectively. We have briefly reviewed the obligations in the Proceeds of Crime Regulations, which again is the primary legislation we use when evaluating a company during an on-site visit. Regarding supervision, the BMA's MLTF department has determined that the securities sector has faced compliance challenges regarding several regulatory obligations, as outlined on this slide. We encourage you to review your company's policies and procedures with due attention given to the Proceeds of Crime Regulations. This is particularly important when it comes to customer onboarding policies and the identification versus the verification process. Overall, jurisdiction-specific training and awareness can also help improve the policies and processes adopted by companies in Bermuda. The BMA reviews regulated institutions' compliance with Bermuda's sanctions regime. We check that your company's sanctions policies and procedures are appropriately and effectively applied. During our most recent on-site visits, the authority also identified a need for additional training in this area. Another area of concern that needs attention is independent audits related to MLTF and the sanctions program. These audits often do not cover all the relevant areas that are documented in the AML guidance notes. The audit report should provide a complete picture of how a company can improve its AML program. When done correctly, these audits can help regulated financial entities lower their risk of breaching Bermuda's jurisdiction regulations. Finally, regulated institutions risk non-compliance when they rely on generic, off-the-shelf policies provided by third-party consultants without fully understanding the proceeds of crime regulations and AML obligations. While engaging a third-party consultant is not inherently problematic, it is critical that AML policies and procedures are tailored to the institution's specific operations and risks. Failure to do so often results in improper implementation, which can lead to systemic issues uncovered during on-site reviews, exposing significant compliance challenges. The next segment of this presentation explores the MLTF on-site examination process. As part of the money laundering and terrorist financing preventative measures and controls, the BMA conducts on-site examinations. Subsequently, we review the AML framework to ensure it meets the legislative requirements. This prevention mechanism helps to ensure that Bermuda's regulated financial institutions are not used for money laundering or terrorist financing. Therefore, regulated financial institutions must be prepared to showcase a robust compliance framework. This should be considered business as usual, since we only check against what companies have already committed to as part of their licensing requirements. The documented MLTF policies and processes should be reviewed annually to ensure compliance with the regulations. This also includes a regulated financial institution demonstrating that the appropriate training has taken place. During the on-site examination, interviews with senior management and select staff will occur. File testing submissions should be submitted promptly. Documents should not be modified once the on-site review has started, except for client requests or routine changes to customer information. Finally, discussing the outcome of the on-site review with senior management during the closing meeting is advisable. If significant findings or gaps are identified, enforcement will be considered. The following slides provide sector-specific resources for the securities sector operating in Bermuda. They include Financial Action Task Force guidance, Bermuda's laws and regulations, a summary of essential laws related to MLTF in Bermuda, BMA guidance notes and links to the respective legislation. The authority offers a free service provider training course that is available to regulated financial entities and service providers that want to reinforce and validate their staff's knowledge of Bermuda's MLTF regime and the MLTF requirements. The following slides are from the Financial Intelligence Agency, or the FIA. In this next section of the presentation, we will provide an overview of suspicious activity reports submitted to the FIA from Q1 of 2021 to Q3 of 2024 by the fund administrators. From Q1 2021 to Q3 2024, there were 25 filings by 5 fund administrators, 7 in 2021, 8 in 2022, 6 in 2023, 4 in Q1 2024, and none in Q2 and Q3 2024. Of interest, none of the reports filed were rejected during this period. Next, we have an overview of suspicious activity and suspicious transaction report filings submitted by investment businesses to the FIA from Q1 2021 to Q1 2024. There were 28 filings in 2021, 42 in 2022, and 18 in 2023. In 2024, there were 8 in Q1, 14 in Q2, and 9 in Q3. Of note, all of the filings during these periods were submitted by 12 investment businesses. 2 filings were rejected in 2022 and 2023 due to the following reasons. Amendments were required. The filing was submitted under the incorrect reporting sector. We'll now continue with an overview of suspicious activity and suspicious transaction report filings submitted to the FIA from Q1 2021 to Q1 2024 by investment funds. Over this time period, only 1 filing occurred, which happened in 2022. Please note that 8 filings by funds were identified during this period. However, the filings were submitted under the incorrect reporting sector, namely the investment service business sector. Some of the trends that have been identified in fund administration filings include market abuse or insider trading, market manipulation, use of false documents by an investment manager, transfer of ownership of the shares of a new holding company believed to be owned by a sanctioned person just prior to the date of that the UK sanctions came into effect, adverse media identified involving sanctions or fraud, refusal by the client to provide a source of funds, source of wealth, and ultimate beneficiary owner documentation. Frequent high-value distribution requests submitted by clients to be paid urgently. Notably, a trend observed across all reporting sectors is clients' refusal to comply with customer due diligence requirements, leading to the identification of suspicious activity by the reporting entity. Some of the trends identified in investment business filings include declined business due to adverse media identified, declined business due to suspect activity, market abuse or insider trading and market manipulation, contradiction of the client's instructions by lawyers when conducting transactions, adverse media identified involving sanctions, money laundering, drug trafficking, fraud such as a Ponzi scheme or tax evasion, refusal by the client to provide a source of wealth documentation before the transfer of funds. Some of the trends identified in the filing correctly submitted under the investment funds and investment business reporting sectors include insufficient KYC/CDD documents, e.g. identification copies of authorized signatories, refusal to provide KYC/CDD documents, adverse media, e.g. world check screenings, investor location links to high-risk countries, financial advisor ended a relationship with an investor, pass-through vehicle, e.g. deposit made with the intention of investing in a closed client account. Let's review an investment business case study involving suspected fraud and money laundering. In July 2023, an investment business reported receiving an adverse media alert on a client during its customer screening process. The client was the principal of XYZ LLC, which purported to be an investment company operating out of South America and the Caribbean. Criminal complaints were raised alleging that XYZ LLC was a Ponzi scheme. A review of the company's investment funds revealed they were not being used for trading activity. Instead, new investor funds were used to pay other investor distributions, cover XYZ LLC's business expenses, compensate XYZ LLC's employees, and fund the owner's lifestyle. XYZ investors were given false account statements and fictitious trading data. The complaint indicated that XYZ LLC obtained over $50 million from its investors. Based on the identity information collected during the onboarding, the investment business was very certain that the customer was the same person involved in this incident. The company restricted access to the client's account and decided to terminate its relationship with the client. The investment business sector identified a number of investment-related scams and adverse media as key indicators within the suspicious transaction reporting narrative. The FIA then restricted these accounts at the time of the initial findings and required the companies to terminate their relationship with the client. A subsequent suspicious transaction report was filed in 2024, noting the latest screening confirmed that the beneficial owner has been added to a U.S. law enforcement list. The FIA then sent Section 16 notices to local reporting entities and notified the Bermuda Police Service. Spontaneous disclosures were also sent to the respective overseas financial intelligence units. Finally, through analysis, the FIA identified a probable link between a Bermudian and this investment company. Key takeaways. Thanks to the excellent details and supporting documents provided with the suspicious transaction filings, the FIA was able to make other countries and local competent authorities aware of the suspect financial activity linked to the policy and the related legal and natural persons. Although Bermuda authorities and overseas authorities did not confiscate the funds, the sharing of this intelligence is an asset for future and ongoing investigations into this matter. Let's review a case involving a filing in 2024 by a local fund administrator. The filing reported adverse media involving convictions from money laundering, wire fraud, and bribery in the USA linked to an investor. In 2022, the investor invested $1 million into a fund administered by the fund administrator. The money was wired from an account in the name of the investor's company, but the investment was solely in the investor's name. In 2024, the investor requested a withdrawal. Due diligence and LexisNexis searches were conducted, and it was discovered that the investor was currently in jail for money laundering, wire fraud, and bribery. As a result, consent was sought by the fund administrator to make the redemption payment. Report indicators selected on behalf of the fund administrator to identify the characteristics within the narrative of the STR included consent request, criminal history, and declined or refused business or suspected criminal activity. Actions taken by the FIA as a result of this filing included making a spontaneous disclosure to an overseas financial intelligence unit, making a spontaneous disclosure to the Bermuda Police Service. With the support of the suspicious transaction report and accompanying documentation provided by the fund administrator, both local and overseas authorities gained insight into the client's financial activities concerning inflows and outflows from Bermuda. Although no interest was shown by the overseas financial intelligence units, appreciation was expressed by the Financial Intelligence Unit for the assistance and cooperation provided due to the filing. Another 2022 case study involves a suspicious transaction report filed by an investment fund. The filing reported suspected money laundering as the investment fund was unable to obtain adequate documentation to provide sufficient assurance regarding the source of wealth of the ultimate beneficial owner. As a result of a negative world check screening, the investment fund was unable to obtain sufficient assurance that the monies received were not the proceeds of crime. According to media reports, the ultimate beneficial owner was under investigation and had been charged with money laundering. Other offense charges had also been brought against this individual over the past 10 years involving crimes such as racketeering, bribery, corruption, and fraud. The value of assets being held by the investment fund as of August 2022 was approximately $1.5 million. Report indicators selected on behalf of the fund to identify the characteristics within the narrative of the suspicious transaction report included money laundering, bribery, corruption, adverse media, beneficial ownership, inadequate/evasive explanation, no source of wealth, a politically exposed person, refusal to comply with Know Your Customer requirements, use of corporate vehicles, The actions taken by the FIA as a result of this filing included making a spontaneous disclosure to overseas financial intelligence units, making a spontaneous disclosure to the Bermuda Police Service. Thanks to the detailed narrative and supporting documentation provided by the investment fund, local and overseas authorities were provided with added intelligence about the suspicious individual and his associations. If there is future interest in these parties, the respective jurisdictions can now recognize their connection to Bermuda. The suspicious activity reports and suspicious transaction report filings from Q1 2021 to Q1 2024 were of good quality. As a reminder, for suspicious activity reports, any supporting documentation should also be provided. Supporting documentation includes, for example, copies of IDs, account opening documents, and any adverse media links that will support the narrative of the suspicious activity report. This information assists with the FIA's analysis and dissemination of informative disclosures to the competent authorities in Bermuda and in other jurisdictions. We would also like to stress the importance of providing the following respective supporting documentation and bank account details for the beneficiary bank or institution if a request is made for a transfer of funds or policy ownership. Beneficiary bank name, beneficiary bank address, beneficiary account number, beneficiary account name, amount and currency involved, intermediary bank, IBAN/SWIFT code, transfer of ownership request form, account withdrawal form. To support the sector, the FIA will be providing guidance on the introduction of a new type of suspicious transaction report for consent requests. This report will help FIA analysts to identify consent requests easily instead of depending on the term consent request mentioned within the reporting narrative or the report indicator labeled consent request. In this section, we will explain the importance of reporting suspicious transactions. Firstly, when consent is requested from the FIA to return suspect funds to a customer or to process a suspected transfer of ownership requested by the customer, it is crucial to submit a suspicious transaction report. This report allows for the recording of suspicious activities in the AML system. FIA analysts can identify suspicious amounts using this platform. Secondly, companies should report declined business to the FIA when adverse media or suspicious activity is identified. Also, remember to keep a declined business log as mandated by the BMA. This log may provide value for future analysis and investigations by the FIA as well as local and overseas competent authorities. Thirdly, the FIA discourages filings based solely on a client's or potential client's refusal to provide customer due diligence or know your customer when no suspect activity can be identified. Examples of suspect activity include adverse media, change of communication with the customer, conversations with the customer about tax evasion, and the provision of questionable documents. It is crucial for reporting entities with multiple sector licenses to file under the specific reporting sector license and the corresponding reporting entity where the suspicious activity was detected, as oversights on this have contributed to lower filings for investment funds. Likewise, please review the reporting sector under which your company is currently registered into the GoAML application to ensure it is correct. If there is an incorrect categorization, please make the change and notify the FIA at analyst@fia.bm. As we conclude today's outreach session, there are a few relevant points to highlight. From the authorities' perspective, it is essential to create a strategy that targets the key risks in your company's MLTF program. This includes checking your company's business risk assessment every year or even more regularly and updating it when money laundering or terrorist financing risks change. Also, compliance officers play a vital role in ensuring your company remains compliant with the rules. They must be aware of the details of the proceeds of crime regulations and ensure that all employees in your company are aware of them and adhere to them. It is also important to do what we call a gap analysis. This is when a check is performed to ensure that your company's MLTF and sanctions policies, procedures, and controls are up to date and align with the latest proceeds of crime regulations and other related laws. Another point of discussion is the difference between identifying a customer and verifying their identity. A word of caution: if your company is considering outsourcing some of its MLTF activities to another company, a close eye needs to be kept on those outsourced activities to ensure they are being conducted correctly. Remember that your company will be accountable for any failures associated with outsourcing or reliance on another company. Today, we discussed the risks and warning signs of money laundering and terrorist financing, together with providing insights from supervisors and strategies to aid in prevention. Our colleagues at the FIA also shared specific trends and report-related information for the securities sector that should be incorporated into your company's training programs and AML and ATF policies. Our goal is to improve your company's defense systems and compliance with anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing regulations. Each and every one of us needs to contribute to strengthening Bermuda's defenses against these threats. By enhancing our systems and reporting processes, we can improve business outcomes and uphold Bermuda's reputation as a leading international financial center. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to your industry association, the BMA at aml@bma.bm, or the Financial Intelligence Agency at info@fia.bm. Remember, we're here to help.